What if the deadliest weapon on the battlefield was something you could not see? No explosion, no warning, just a quiet shell and a drifting cloud. By the time you realize what it is, your lungs are already burning. This is not fiction, this is not a myth. This is the reality of the Iran-Iraq war, where chemical weapons turned the air itself into a silent killer. Welcome to History Ledger. Today we uncover one of the darkest chapters of modern warfare, the use of mustard gas and nerve agents against Iranian troops and the thousands who suffered in silence. From the first signs of invisible poison to the chaos of the battlefield, to the scars that never faded. This is a story of war where survival meant breathing, and every breath could be your last. The desert was never silent. Even at night, the wind carried distant echoes of artillery rumbling like a storm that never passed. It was the early 1980s, and the Iran-Iraq war had already consumed hundreds of thousands of lives. What began as a territorial dispute had hardened into a war of endurance. Trenches carved across the dry earth and barbed wire stretched 4 miles. Neither side could advance without paying in blood. Iranian forces, often young and lightly equipped, relied on sheer numbers and belief. Wave after wave moved forward, overwhelming Iraqi positions through sacrifice alone for Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein. The pressure continued to rise, and conventional weapons were no longer enough. Behind closed doors, a quiet decision was made, one that would change the nature of the war forever. At first, the shells seemed ordinary, landing with a dull impact without the violent explosions soldiers expected. There was no shrapnel, no fire, only a strange silence followed by a thin cloud drifting low across the ground like fog. The soldiers did not run because they did not understand what they were facing. Then came the burning eyes, stinging throats, tightening breathing, becoming difficult. What they were experiencing was mustard gas, a chemical weapon banned by international law, yet now released onto the battlefield. It did not kill instantly. Instead, it worked slowly and deliberately. Skin-blistered lungs filled with fluid and vision began to fade. Panic spread as men clawed at their uniforms. Some ran blindly while others collapsed where they stood. Most Iranian soldiers had little protection. Gas masks were rare and training was limited. Some tried to cover their faces with cloth while others pressed themselves into the ground hoping for protection. But the battlefield had already changed. It was no longer defined by bullets and explosions. It had become something far more dangerous. Fear itself had changed into something invisible, something that could not be seen or fought. Iraqi commanders saw the results clearly. Chemical weapons slowed Iranian advances and broke their momentum. What began as limited use soon became repeated strategy. The gas returned again and again across different battlefields. Iranian troops began to recognize the warning signs, the quiet shells, the drifting clouds, but recognition often came too late. By the time the faint smell reached them, the damage had already begun. This was no longer conventional warfare. It was something forbidden, and yet the world remained distant. On the front lines, there were no debates, only soldiers, standing in a drifting cloud, breathing in a weapon they could not see. By the mid-1980s, the war had learned a new language, not of gunfire, but of silence. The Iran-Iraq war had entered its most brutal phase. Neither side could claim victory, but one side had found a different way to fight. Chemical strikes were no longer rare. They became part of coordinated offensives used across frontline supply routes and even medical areas. Mustard gas spread, once again heavier than air. It sank into trenches, turning them into deadly traps. Soldiers who sought safety below ground soon realized the danger as the gas settled around them, lingering and burning slowly. Skin-blistered eyes closed and breathing became painful. Even those who tried to escape carried the poison with them as it clung to their clothes and bodies. But mustard gas was only the beginning. Soon nerve agents were introduced, far more lethal, and immediate exposure meant seconds, not hours. Muscle ceased, vision blurred, and bodies collapsed as the nervous system shut down. There were no visible wounds, no blood, only soldiers falling without warning. For those still alive, the fear became overwhelming. How do you fight something you cannot see? Some survivors described a faint smell like garlic or sweetness, a warning that arrived too late. Field hospitals were overwhelmed as doctors faced injuries they had never been trained to treat. Water was poured over burning skin and bandages wrapped around blistered bodies. But nothing could reverse the damage. Even survivors were not safe as the effects remained inside their lungs, eyes, and bodies. In regions like the Fall Peninsula and Majnoon Islands, chemical attacks shaped entire battles. Advances stopped and units disappeared for Iraqi forces. These weapons became a tool of control, allowing them to clear areas without direct combat. But the use of chemical weapons did not remained limited to soldiers. In 1988, the town of Halabja became the site of one of the most devastating chemical attacks in history. Thousands of civilians were exposed to deadly agents. Many died where they stood in their homes and streets. Entire families were found together as if frozen in time. Images from Halabja spread across the world, revealing the true scale of chemical warfare. This was no longer just a battlefield tactic, it was mass suffering for Iranian troops. This confirmed a harsh truth: the gust would not stop. The rules of war had been broken, and no one seemed able to enforce them. The air itself had become the enemy. Every breath, a risk, every moment, uncertain. They were trained to face bullets and explosions, but not a war where the air itself could kill them. The war did not end all at once. It faded slowly like smoke drifting away. By 1988, the Iran-Iraq War was coming to an end after 8 years of destruction, but for many, the war never truly stopped. Thousands of Iranian soldiers who survived chemical attacks returned home carrying invisible damage, their lungs weakened, making every breath difficult. Some lost their sight, while others lived with permanent haze. Burn scars remained across their skin as lasting reminders, and deeper injuries continued to grow within their bodies. Doctors struggled to treat conditions without cures, including respiratory disease and chronic pain. Hospitals filled with veterans whose suffering extended far beyond the battlefield. Some families later noticed health issues in children born years after exposure, suggesting a lasting impact beyond one generation. Beyond Iran, the world began to take notice. Reports of chemical weapons could no longer be ignored. United Nations launched investigations, confirming repeated use through evidence such as soil samples, medical records, and eyewitness accounts. Yet global response remained limited. Political interests slowed accountability for victims. This silence felt heavy, like the gas they once breathed in Halabja. The scars were equally deep. Entire communities had been lost, and memories of that day remained vivid over time. These events pushed the world toward stronger action. Agreements were reinforced and new systems created to prevent future use. Organizations such as the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons were established to monitor and enforce bans. It was a step forward, but built on immense suffering. Many survivors chose to share their stories, not for sympathy, but for remembrance. They carried the war within them. In every breath and every passing year, the battlefield never truly left them. Chemical weapons changed the nature of war, blurring the line between soldier and victim, leaving behind no visible ruins, only scars that could not be seen from a distance. The war ended in 1988, but for those who breathed the poison, it never truly ended. The bombs have fallen silent, and the battlefields have faded into history, but for those who survived, the war continues within them, and damaged lungs, fading vision, and every difficult breath. Chemical weapons changed warfare forever, making it invisible, unforgiving, and impossible to escape. And perhaps the most haunting truth is how long it took the world to truly listen. But this was not the only time history turned to forbidden weapons. There are other stories just as dark and just as forgotten. Stories the world almost erased. If you want to uncover more real, untold history, make sure to subscribe to History Ledger, because the past is not just something we remember, it is something we must understand, and sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones you cannot see.